Hey everybody, welcome into the Shelby County High School Football Show and postseason edition. Hard to believe we've made it to that point in the season, but this Friday kicks off the first week of the postseason. It's been an exciting ride so far. It's only going to get more exciting as we move forward. Obviously, each night now, the season is on the line, and coming into this year, we didn't know what to expect, that we would make it halfway through the regular season, and here we sit going into the playoffs, and a lot of these players coming into the year, especially the seniors, didn't know when it was going to be their last game of their career. And so now, already playing with that extra motivation, you come into this week, you know that your season is on the line now. There's going to be a lot of excitement. And for Shelby County, this is the most playoff teams we've had in a while. The last 3 years, we've only had 5 teams from the county make it to the postseason. This year, we almost have that many playing at home. That's how great of a year it's been for local football teams. But 7 total teams make it to the 2020 playoffs, a special ride for a lot of schools this year. 4 of those schools will be playing on their home field after earning home field advantage in the first round of the playoffs as one of those top 2 seeds heading into the postseason. So an exciting ride to this point, going to get even more exciting. Obviously, some big matchups this Friday night. The easiest we'll talk about here shortly is going to be Thompson taking on Grissom at home. The Warriors probably should handle business pretty easily in that matchup, but this is the playoffs. Anything can happen. Grissom is playing better as of late, so we'll talk about that game. But the 6A games across the board are what's going to be so exciting this week. You've got Pelham, Helena, and Briarwood all in big matchups as we sit here at Briarwood Christian School, beautiful campus here at Briarwood, as they get set to play Hartselle this Friday night, and what should be a very good defensive battle between those two teams. We're going to talk extensively about that one, as well as those other 6A games. Pelham and Helena both playing at home as well in very big matchups. Pelham's got Lee Montgomery, and you've got Helena taking on Carver Montgomery. So we're going to break those games down. Oak Mountain traveling up to Austin for the first round of the playoffs, and then you've got Montevallo and Shelby County both in the postseason as well. With some big matchups ahead. Shelby County taking on a top 10 team in Pike Road, and the Montevallo Bulldogs, they'll be traveling to take on St. James this Friday night. So, I mean, it's here, the first week of the playoffs. It's not going to kick off in a slow way whatsoever, and the weather not kicking off in a slow way either. It feels like playoff football out here on Monday morning as we shoot this video. About 35 degrees out here this morning. So the 1st of November, it's a new season now. This is playoff football. Each week, your season is on the line, and it's going to start this Friday night. Let's break down all of the games. We're going to start with Thompson taking on Grissom. We'll go down classification by classification, and then at the end, we'll obviously break down our SCR Stars of the week from the final week of the regular season and talk about the recaps from some of those teams that did not make the playoffs. Right now, we're going to focus on those playoff teams and what they have ahead on Friday night. The path to repeating as Class 7A state champions, it starts this Friday night with a home matchup against the Grissom Tigers for Thompson. This is obviously a big game to continue the momentum that they've had throughout the regular season, but look at what Thompson's done so far. A perfect 10-0 regular season, and honestly didn't feel like any game they were in danger of losing throughout this season. They just handled everybody, and that's in large part due to what we've seen from Connor Harrell at the quarterback position, a junior quarterback coming in to fill the shoes of Sawyer Pate, who did tremendous job last year leading the Warriors to their 2nd state championship in school history, and he was following up another strong quarterback, a 2-year starter in Talia Tungavailoa, who's now at Maryland and had a big game this past Saturday night at the collegiate level as well. So for what we've seen from Connor Harrell to step in and really not make the Warriors miss a beat, despite replacing those 2 top talents there at Thompson, Harrell stepped in as a junior quarterback and already around 3,000 yards and still the playoffs to go. He helped the Warriors repeat as region champions with a big win against Hoover a couple of weeks ago, despite a couple of interceptions in that game after throwing just one the entire regular season leading into that matchup. So Connor Harrell's been a stud at quarterback there for Thompson this year, but you look across the board, the offense is loaded. They've got Sam Reynolds, Ryan Peppins, J.B. Mitchell, Trey Roberson, if he's healthy going into the postseason, will be a big playmaker as well. Then in the backfield, you've got Jarrett Crockett at running back, and a couple of those receivers I just mentioned can also slide to running back. But the key is what we've seen from Thompson defensively. Their offense is going to put up points, so the key is to not allow other teams to keep up with you. And this week they're taking on a good team in Grissom defensively. It's won 3 games in a row, giving up 21 or less in each of those games and 6 or less in the last 2 weeks with a shutout in that span. So you know Grissom's defense starting to click here late in the season. They're going to look to try to shut down that Thompson offense, but it hasn't happened this year. They've taken on some of the best defenses in the state. You look at what they did against Hewitt-Trussville, against Oxford, the 6A number 1 to start the season, against Mountain Brook, the 6A number 2 later in the season, which is arguably the best defense in the state, and they scored the most points on them this season, and obviously what Thompson was able to do against Hoover as well. They just continually put up points, so the key is going to come defensively this week, making sure that you limit what Grissom's able to do on the offensive side of the football. And when you look at what Thompson's done this year so far on the defensive side, led by guys like Tony Mitchell, Jeremiah Alexander, and so many others on that defensive side. Tristan Woody is a guy that's really stepped up too, Jax Van Zant. They're just so loaded on that side of the football. It's tough to see Grissom having enough firepower in this game to be able to score enough points to somehow shock Thompson in the first round of the playoffs. You're going to have to score, if you're Grissom, close to 40 points in this game. Looking at what Thompson's consistently done, there's a very good chance they're going to get 35 or more in this game, averaging 43.2 points per game so far this season. So for Grissom to come in, a team that's averaging just 24.2 points per game, to be able to make up around 16 more points against this defense, which could be the best in the state, giving up 15 points per game or less so far this season, I don't see that happening. This should be an easier game for Thompson to ease into their playoff run. Now, the big thing is they could get in their own heads. That's where you got to be careful if you're the Thompson Warriors. You're looking to repeat as state champions, so you can't get too far ahead of yourself at this point. You need to just ease into the playoffs and make sure you continue to gain that confidence throughout the rest of the way. Last year, they lost their regular season finale to Hewitt-Trussville, and I think that kind of sparked their playoff run. This year, I think they just feel like they're the most dominant team in the state. They're not taking any chances. I think each week they know what's on the line, and they're very motivated by that chance to repeat as 7A state champions. Regardless of what happens on Friday night, the first round of the playoffs, for the Oak Mountain Eagles, it's been a special football season. They started 4-0 for the first time in school history, have made it to the playoffs for the first time since 2016. They're going to look to pick up a big win this Friday night and win their first playoff game in a while, as well as they take on Austin, a tough 2-hour trip north up to North Alabama, but this is a chance for the Eagles. They have a chance, in my opinion, to be one of the teams that pulls off one of the more shocking upsets that we could see on Friday night. Austin is a top 10 team. They should be the favorite in this game, and they'll likely win this football game. But you can't tell that to the Oak Mountain Eagles. This is a team that's lost 3 games in a row after that 6-1 start to the season. They're feeling a little bit chipped. They're a little bit angry, determined to kind of prove that they're better than what you've seen the last 3 weeks. And the key is they've taken on one of the most difficult schedules in the state. Look at the teams that they've played so far this season. Obviously, in Class 7A Region 3, they've taken on the top three teams in the state, Thompson, Hoover, and Hewitt-Trussville, and they lost all 3 of those games going away. They didn't play those games too close, but everybody else they seem to handle their business with. And if you look at what Austin would have done in this region, they likely would have been battling with Oak Mountain for the 4 seed going into the playoffs. So without Austin in the region, Oak Mountain gets that 4 seed and is headed to the playoffs, and they get a chance to take on now an Austin that's a 1 seed. That shows how difficult this region in Class 7A Region 3 is. Austin, a 1 seed out of their region. So Oak Mountain headed up there this Friday night, and this is a game that's a little bit more interesting when you look at it now. Obviously, the Eagles have lost 3 in a row going into this matchup, but Austin lost last week as well and really didn't look great. Lose 31-22 to Mountain Brook, and I know Mountain Brook's the 6A number 2 team in the state. Spent a little bit of time at number 1 this season. But just seeing that kind of performance shows me that they could be susceptible in a game like this against Oak Mountain, because this is an Oak Mountain team that loves to run the football. You look at what Mountain Brook loves to do, play defense and run the football. And you look at those 2 teams, Mountain Brook's a better team than Oak Mountain this year, but they're very comparable numbers-wise right now, and I think that Oak Mountain's got a chance to at least keep this game close because of the style of football they play. Now, they're going to have to play better football. They're going to have to get back to what they were doing early in the year, which is play great defense and get some explosive plays from both Judah Tate and Evan Smith, the quarterback there at Oak Mountain. And it's worked for the most part throughout the season. They've just run into a difficult slew of teams. Last week against Clay Chalkville, they lose 21-14, had a 7-0 lead, and then a 14-7 lead behind Evan Smith. He had 2 big plays in the running game at quarterback, one for 77 yards, one for 81 yards. So a big night for him, but beyond that, they just didn't have much on the offensive side of the football. They're going to have to find that rhythm offensively because this defense is really good this year. It's the best defense they've had in a while, unless they've been playing the likes of Thompson, Hewitt-Trussville, and Hoover. But for this defense to play good, they're going to have to not be on the field the entire game. Now, last week in the second half, they made some mistakes early in that game defensively to allow Clay Chalkville to tie that game 14-all going into the half. But in the second half, Oak Mountain's defense really stepped up, gave the offense chance after chance. The offense, however, sputtered there inside the 5-yard line 2 times. They had first and goal from the 5 on 2 different occasions and could not punch in the football. And that ended up leading to the 21-14 loss in the second half there. If they could have punched both of those in, they win that game 28-21. So Oak Mountain's going to have to find a way to get some confidence on the offensive side of the ball, really be motivated there. They've got a strong leader and quarterback at Smith. They've got a couple of talented playmakers in Judah Tate and Noah Young on that side of the ball as well. Everybody's going to have to be clicking, including the offensive front. And if Oak Mountain can somehow play one of their best games of the season, wouldn't surprise me if they upset Austin in the first round of the playoffs. But this is a very good football team that spent the majority of the season in the top 10 so far this season, scoring 38.4 points per game and giving up 17.6 points per game. Oak Mountain, on the other hand, scoring 29 points per game and giving up 27.5 points per game. Now, Oak Mountain's taken on such a difficult schedule. They're not going to be scared of this matchup. That's what gives them the confidence going in to have a chance to pull off the upset. It's going to be a tough road to victory, but if there's going to be a big upset this Friday night, don't be shocked if it comes in Austin by way of the Eagles. This game for the Pelham Panthers just got a whole lot more interesting after what we saw last week. They're taking on Lee Montgomery, a very talented 6A football team, in the first round of the playoffs. Now, the interesting thing is Pelham is a 1 seed. They'll be playing at home, and Lee is a 4 seed coming into this matchup. But when you look at it on paper, these two teams pretty evenly matched from what they can do well. Obviously, Pelham's offense has been playing extremely good football so far this season, but Lee's defense has been playing lights out. And from what we saw last week, Pelham loses 20-18 to Homewood on a last-second field goal. Now, Pelham had a chance to win that game. A late pass interference there is what gave Homewood a chance to kick that long 40-yard game-winning field goal. Homewood ends up taking advantage and winning 20-18. Pelham had the 18-17 lead there in the final minute, but ends up losing that game. But they should have won that game. That's a game they were the better team in that matchup, and they just didn't have an on night. And that was a Homewood defense that had been playing decent football this year, but not as good as they have in the past. And you look at the way Pelham's offense struggled last week, a team that's been scoring 30-plus points per game seemingly every night of the season, and they go out there and they have their worst output of the year. Now, you wonder what all was going into that as far as their motivation in that game, but I think they were pretty motivated because they had lost 6 in a row to Homewood. I think they wanted to end that streak, but in my opinion, honestly, it was probably a good thing as far as motivation goes, because now you've got a Pelham team, a team that's been so successful offensively, struggled last week. They're going to be going into this matchup against a Lee team I think was not easily, they were, in my opinion, I thought they were going to win this football game a week ago at this time. But to see Pelham finally face some adversity, I think they've got a much better chance going into this matchup now. Originally thought Pelham was still about a year away from a deep postseason run, but looking at what happened last week, I think they're going to be able to fine-tune a lot of things. Now I almost think they can win this football game. You look at this offense, Dylan Peterson, Will Langford, Gabe Gamble, Darius Copeland, and so many others, Chase Christian. It's such a talented offense. The offensive line has gotten better and more experienced experienced depth-wise throughout the season. They faced that adversity last week, putting up their worst output of the season, and now they have the challenge of taking on one of the best defenses they've seen so far this season. This is a Lee team that's giving up 13 points per game right now. It's playing so good on that side of the football. And you look at what Pelham was doing offensively going into that matchup against Homewood. They had scored 34 or more in 6 straight games. So it was an offense that was clicking and rolling. Dylan Peterson had 150 yards in almost every game during that stretch and obviously struggled last week. Now, I do think they wanted to keep him healthy going into the playoffs as well, because that's obviously one of your best players. But he's going to have to bounce back, as is the rest of the offense, taking on such a talented defense in Lee. This is a team that's yet to give up more than 26 points this season and sits at 6-3 overall this year, with all 3 losses to very good football teams, and in their last 2 games have given up 8 or less with a bye week leading into this matchup. So Lee's coming in as confident as they can defensively, and an extra week to prepare for this matchup. Where Pelham's coming in, they may lose a little bit of confidence, but I think they're going to gain a lot of determination going into this matchup. And you look at what Lee's done offensively, just hadn't played great offensively so far this season. I think if Pelham can come out and put up 21, 28 points, that's really all they need to do in this game, just because of what we've seen offensively from Lee so far this season. So if Pelham can come in, do that, just have a slightly better offensive performance than they had a week ago. This is a defense that's playing really good at Pelham right now, dating back to that Chelsea game, playing some great football, played great last week despite the loss, had Homewood to 17 points in that final minute of the game. I think they're going to hold Lee in check offensively. It's a matter of the offense getting to around 21 to 28 points. They can do that. I think they win that football game, and you got to ride with them. They've got so much talent on that side of the ball that's now going to be motivated. I really think Pelham can pull off this win. I think they have a strong chance of advancing to the second round. The list of exciting first-round matchups for 6A teams in the playoff continues right here at Briarwood Christian School. The Lions get set to host Hartselle in the first round this Friday night, and this could be one of the more entertaining games of the week this Friday, and that goes for all of our 6A games. But this one right here is going to be fun to watch from a defensive standpoint. You look at what both of these teams have done this season. It's been impressive to say the least, and wouldn't be surprised by either of these teams making a good postseason run here over the next few weeks. It's going to be difficult for any 6A team to string anything together just because of the consistency from 1 to 4 seeds in every region, and that's no different in this matchup. Briarwood taking on Hartselle as the 2 seed. Hartselle will be the 3 seed traveling here to Lion Pride Stadium. But for Briarwood to be in this situation, their first year back in 6A, last time they were in 6A, I believe 2014 and 2015, they struggled. They made the playoffs each year, I believe, as a 3 or 4 seed. But here they are back in 6A this year in a strong season, to say the least, with what they've been able to do so far this season. Entered the playoffs as a 2 seed with a big win against Homewood a few weeks ago. And here they sit, a chance to pick up a home playoff win in their first year back in the 6A classification. Now, it's going to be difficult because this is a very talented Hartselle team. It's a Hartselle team that's played great throughout this season. Briarwood sitting at 7-2 coming into this matchup. Hartselle sitting at 7-3, but all 3 of those losses to very good football teams so far this season. And this is a team that's won 6 of 7 games in recent play, and they're scoring 33.2 points per game, but get this, giving up just 14 points per game. Now, Briarwood, they've also won 6 of 7 games, a very good football team. They've scored 25 points per game this season, and get this, they're giving up 11.1 points per game so far on the year. So something's got to give in this matchup. Both defenses, though, I expect will not be hit. I expect both of these defenses to play well, especially in the first round of the playoffs. That tends to be the case. I think you're going to see that. You look at these two teams, they've met the last 2 years. 2 years ago, Hartselle picked up a 14-7 overtime victory against Briarwood. Last year, Briarwood wins 21-10 to get some revenge. But this year, a little bit different of a team. They're very talented on both sides, as you can see with what they're doing offensively with the 33 points per game so far. But you look at what Briarwood's been able to do defensively so far this season. They've yet to give up more than 21 in any game. They have one shutout on the record, and they've given up 7 or less 4 different times against a very good schedule, too. You look at some of the teams they competed against. Obviously, number 2, Mountain Brook. They've played 7A teams like Spain Park, played Hueytown this year, earlier this year as well. And then look at what they did against Homewood to cement the number 2 seed, arguably their best performance of the season on both sides of the ball in such a big moment for them in that game. So expect Briarwood to come out, continue to play strong defensively. I don't see Hartselle scoring a ton of points in this game because of what Briarwood can do defensively. You look across the board, they've played some pretty good offensive teams at times this year, and nobody's been able to figure them out other than 7A teams. Nobody's been able to score more than 20 points against Briarwood this season. So I would expect the defense to be fine this week. That said, Hartselle's defense is really good as well. Briarwood's going to have to find a way to get something going offensively. You look at Luke Rebels and the running back there for the Lions. He's been tremendous every game this season, right around 100 yards at least every week. Last week had about 90 yards rushing, but also added a 92-yard kickoff return, and he can also hurt you in the receiving game. He's a very talented athlete, one of the best players on the field at all times, and he's going to be key in this game. But what's going to be even more key, in my opinion, is Christopher Vizina and the quarterback position finding a rhythm in the passing game. We've seen some receivers step up in recent weeks. You look at Nick Dyson, you look at some other guys. They've had at least 2 guys go over 100 yards this year, and that's what's key. If they can have 2 guys step up in one game, find a rhythm in the passing game against a solid defense to keep that defense a little bit off balance, not know what's coming, that's going to be the biggest key in this game. If they can figure that out, I think Briarwood's got a great chance to win this game by a couple of scores. If not, it's going to be a more last-minute kind of game that I think 2 defensive teams you could see locked in a 14-14 game in the final minute with whoever has having the ball last a chance to score and win this opening round matchup. So very key to see what Briarwood's going to bring out offensively this Friday night, but we know their defense gives them a chance each week, and that's going to lead to a fantastic first-round football game. On paper, this is the first official week of the playoffs for the Helena Huskies, but last week sure felt like a playoff game for them as they pick up a big 12-7 victory against UMS Wright. That was the 3-time defending 5A state champion, and Helena, just as Helena does, came back in the second half to win that football game. A very difficult matchup against a great defensive football team, and it kind of reminds you of what they're going to see this week as well. You look at that game, that was a UMS Wright team playing great defensive football team this year, a team that loves to run the football and be physical, which is exactly what Helena likes to do as well. They trailed that game 7-0, 7-6 there at the half, and then came out in the second half, and just their defense was lights out the entire second half, made big plays down the stretch, and we'll talk about that in our SCR Stars of the Week segment. The entire defense just with some big plays, 4th down stops to get turnover on downs, an interception late in that game, and then you look at what they were able to do on the ground game offensively, and they score a touchdown in that second half from 19 yards out. Kobe Hughes totes it in. They don't get the 2-point conversion, but the defense, it didn't matter because the defense played so well the rest of the way. They win that game 12-7 with a ton on the line. If they lose that game, Helena is traveling to Opelika, a top 10 team, and a big matchup that would have occurred in the first round. But now instead, they're the 2 seed in their region. They get home field advantage in the first round of the playoffs, in a big matchup nonetheless. They get to take on Carver Montgomery. But you look at this matchup, and it's a lot, like I said, what we saw last week against UMS Wright. It really just kind of gives in to what Helena likes to do as a football team. It's a Helena team that every week of the season wants to come out and set the tone by running the ball and being physical up front on offense, and also being physical and shutting you down defensively. Classic old school football. It's what they like to do. And right now, they're healthy, and they have the key guys to make that happen. You look at this team in Helena, Marquise Johnson, the guy that toted it for close to 1,400 yards last year, returning this year, and he hasn't even been the lead back for most of the season. It's been Kobe Hughes, but now both of those guys playing great football, healthy. You look at what they did last week, both of them scoring a touchdown. They're going to be leaned heavily upon this Friday in the first round to get that offense going. Now, if they can come out and get off to a strong start, that's only going to benefit even more. But nonetheless, they tend to wear teams down as they go along throughout the game, and I think that's going to be the biggest key because you're going to see two good defensive football teams in this matchup. Carver right now, they're giving up 15.5 points per game defensively this season, and Helena just slightly better, 15.2 points per game they're giving up on the defensive side of the ball. Helena, they're scoring 26.7 points per game. Carver scoring 24.5 points per game. So neither offense is lighting up the scoreboard, and both defenses are shutting down opposing offenses. That should lead to a very tight, lower-scoring game. And when you see what Helena was able to do last week against a team that knows how to win football games in UMS Wright, shut them down in the second half defensively, leaned upon their seniors heavily, I expect them to do that again in this matchup. I really do. I feel like Helena's got the team. They're motivated. You look at this team last year was great with close to 30 seniors on that team, 9-1 regular season. They lose in the first round of the playoffs. This year's team is motivated from that. They've bounced back. They lost all those seniors, and it didn't matter. They got back to the playoffs as a 2 seed, and that comes with 3 consecutive weeks of not playing a football game in the meat of their schedule. Just imagine what could have happened had they played the entire schedule. They could have won a region championship because they didn't get to play that game against Pelham, who ended up becoming the region champion. So you look at what Helena has done this year, forfeited 2 games, had a game forfeited against them, 3 weeks in a row of no playing, and now they've bounced back to end the season with strong play. I expect them to really be in good shape. They've given up 18 or less points in their last 4 games in a row. I don't see Carver scoring nearly enough points in this matchup, especially if Kobe Hughes and Marquise Johnson come out early. If Helena can jump up 14-0 in the first half, you might as well sell at home because this is a Helena team in the second half that just doesn't give up points and continues to get better offensively. So they've got to come out, set the tone early. It's a team that should be a lot more well-rested. Carver has played 10 games in a row coming into this matchup. They're going to be a little bit more physically beat down, you would expect, and against a very physical offense that Helena's going to put out there, and a defense that can shut you down. I think the Huskies have a strong chance to get redemption from last year's first-round loss and advance on to the second round this year. For the first time since the 2009 season, the Shelby County Wildcats are headed to the postseason, have their first-round matchup set for this Friday night, and what a well-deserved accomplishment for this year's group. A team that was really bought into ending that drought that dated back to 2009, and here they sit set to take on Pike Road in the first round of the playoffs. The Shelby County Wildcats, a very strong regular season at 6-3, guaranteed themselves to finish above 500 for the first time since 2009 as well. So just a tremendous run, and there were some times where they faced adversity this year because they just weren't on the same page on both sides of the ball. Now, the defense has played pretty consistent throughout the year. It's been much better than it was last year, and that's the difference. That's why they're headed to the playoffs, and they did that despite the offense not playing as well as they expected it to throughout this season. But the offense has really started to kind of find a rhythm here in recent weeks. A big win against Talladega last week, a win against Jemison the week before to clinch a spot in the playoffs. And you look at Evan Joyner, a guy that continues to be a key on that offensive side of the football, filling in for Raheem Montgomery, who's gotten injured. Now, if they had both of those guys, this offense would be in really good shape right now. But Joyner, coming off a 200-plus yard rushing performance, 3 touchdowns last week against Talladega, goes into this matchup against Pike Road looking to continue a successful season, while the defense looks to continue playing some great football as well, which has been the key to their season so far. It's why they are sitting in this position. You look at Shelby County right now, they're giving up scoring 24.2 points per game, but get this, they're giving up almost 15 less points per game than they did last year. They've given up 20.4 points per game so far this season, and that's been huge for this football team. Now you look at Pike Road, they're a top 10 team. They're undefeated, 10-0, a strong contender for the Class 5A state championship, but they haven't played the most difficult schedule. This honestly could be one of the more difficult teams that they've played this season. So that makes you think Shelby County at least has some resemblance of a chance in this game because Pike Road just hasn't been challenged a ton this season. But they're a good football team. This is a team so far this season scoring close to 50 points per game and giving up less than 10 points per game. They've given up 7 or less in 6 games this year with 3 shutouts. And you're taking on a Shelby County offense that's kind of been inconsistent this year. So you're going to have to hope, if you're Shelby County, your big goal, come out and control the clock, churn Evan Joyner in the ground game. If he can get going there, they can sustain some long drives, get maybe a 7-10, 14 to nothing 3 lead, somewhere in that range. If they can have a 1 to 2 score lead and just kind of continue to churn the clock throughout this game, that's what they like to do with their option attack. Go on those long drives. If they can have those long drives, and then more importantly, finish those long drives, which has been a struggle at times throughout the season, they can come through and do that. They're going to have a chance at least to pull off the upset. But at the end of the day, Pike Road, one of the best teams in the state this season. It's going to be a tall task for Shelby County to pick up the upset in this game. But for a team that's made the playoffs for the first time since 2009, there's no telling what could happen. This is a team that's ecstatic to be in this situation. They're going to give it their all, just like they have throughout the season to end the drought. I expect you to see a strong group of players excited to take on a Pike Road team in the first round of the playoffs. It's also going to be a difficult first-round matchup for the Montevallo Bulldogs, but just like Shelby County, this is a Montevallo team that just to be in the playoffs, and not only be in the playoffs, but in the playoffs as a 3 seed, is remarkable. Their first year under head coach Blake Boren, this is a team that had so many new faces all across the board. You look at what they lost last year: quarterback Malik Inabanet, receiver J.J. Evans, receiver Jamarius Carter, running back Dion Gilliland. You look at the Gilliland and you look at the 2 receivers, all over 1,000 yards. You look at their quarterback in a Bennett, he was a guy that threw for 3,000-plus yards there at Montevallo. So to lose for 2 years in a row, so to lose all of that talent, and in your first year you've got guys that sophomores, freshmen, you've got guys that haven't played football in a few years, and you've got your team as a 3 seed in the first round of the playoffs. Just a remarkable job by Boren and the coaching staff, but also by a lot of these young players to buy in and get that experience throughout the year. It's a team that also has faced different injuries, different things with COVID-19, and they've come back throughout this year, and now you look at where they are, such an experienced football team for a lot of these young players, and that's going to benefit them hugely moving forward the next few years. It's going to be difficult in the first round. They take on a St. James team that's just played great football so far this season, especially offensively, scoring 32.8 points per game and giving up 22 points per game. Now, they are coming off of a 33-7 loss to 3A Trinity, so they enter with a little bit of uncertainty after that matchup. But you look at Montevallo, this is a team scoring 25.3 points per game, giving up 33.5 points per game. They've struggled at times defensively, but they've also been inconsistent because at times they've played good defensively, especially early in the season. But it's a team that just hasn't been able to get the consistency right because they haven't played on a consistent basis. You look at what they did 4 games this year where they either forfeited or the game was forfeited against them. So. But now they've had 3 head-to-head games in a row. They've won all 3 to earn this spot in the postseason, coming off a week last week where they didn't have to play because Maplesville canceled after Hurricane Zeta caused some damage throughout Shelby County and throughout Maplesville. So you've got a rested team as well, where you look at St. James. This is a team that's played 8 weeks in a row in all 10 of their regular season games. Now, I think Montevallo could have benefited from those extra games this year to gain some experience for some of those younger and inexperienced players, but at the same time, you're going to be a little bit more well-rested, and you've also gained more experience. You look at Montevallo week 1 to Montevallo right now going into the first round of the playoffs, a completely different football team that's got a lot of confidence in different playmakers. If Joseph Anderson can come out and have a huge game running the football, and Kyle Cottingham can continue to have big plays both offensively and defensively, coming off 3 interceptions in his last outing, then you've got a Montevallo team. Wouldn't be surprised if this game is tight. They've played some good teams tight for a while. They've taken on top 10 teams in American Christian, the number 1 team in Class 4A, and Bibb County, also a top 10 team in Class 4A. And Montevallo's competed with them at different times in those games until they just kind of ran out of steam late. I think they've got a chance in this one to at least compete for a while with St. James. I don't think they're going to win at the end of the day, but that said, to be in this situation, remarkable, and there's no telling what can happen because this is a team that is light years better than it was at the start of the season, and this is a St. James team that I think can be a little bit inconsistent at times, especially on the defensive side of the ball, giving up 20-plus points per game. Don't be surprised if this game's a tight one in the second half, and Montevallo has a chance at least to keep this one close and pull off the upset there late. Going to be a fun one to watch regardless. Montevallo, a team you're going to want to watch for the next couple of years. Now it's time to hand out some stars as we get to our SCR Stars of the Week segment and talk about the best players from the final week of the regular season. And we're also going to recap some of those teams that didn't end up making the postseason while we talk about some of these players, because a lot of them, they stood out in their final game of the 2020 season. We're going to start with the Spain Park Jaguars and what they were able to do in just an exciting all-around football game with Hueytown, a game that was won 63-62. And Spain Park didn't lead that game until 63-56. It was 56 all, and they scored yet again the second week in a row. The strong connection, junior quarterback Bennett Meredith finds senior receiver Cooper Kelly for the game-winning touchdown the week before against Tuscaloosa County from 6 yards out, this past week from 7 yards out, and that was just part of two special performances from the quarterback-receiver duo there. Bennett Meredith, he finished that game 34 for 41, 514 yards with 4 touchdown passes. And to have 41 passes with no interceptions to top 500 yards passing in a high school football game, just remarkable from him as a junior quarterback there for the Jags. He's going to be one of the best quarterbacks to watch out for next year. Obviously, as a whole, Spain Park needs to get better defensively. Going to have some other guys step up. But to have him back, you have to feel good about what you're going to have on the offensive side of the ball. Now, they're going to lose Cooper Kelly, but what a tremendous ride he had during his senior season. I believe topped 1,000 yards this year in a special final game in order to do so. 9 catches, 232 yards with 3 touchdowns. Just unbelievable what he was able to do. He was one that I had my eyes set on coming into the season as one of the top receivers in the state, and he didn't disappoint. Had a very big season, closed it out the final 2 weeks, leading the Jags to 2 wins in a row because of that dominance at the wide receiver position. And he was joined by Jalen Ward, another good receiver there for the Jags. Had a very good football season this year. Will be their leader next year at the position. He's a junior along with Meredith. Both those guys coming back next year. In the final game, Ward had 11 catches for 165 yards and 1 touchdown to help the Jags pick up that 63-62 victory. And Michael Ogletree defensively for the Jags, several big plays, a goal line stop that stopped the 2-point conversion there at the end of the game to lead the Jags to the win. Also had a big turnover just a couple of drives earlier that helped the Jags get the ball back. A game that the teams were scoring every time they touched the ball there, especially in the second half, and he flipped the script and gave Spain Park the upper hand to finally take the lead instead of having to come from behind. So a big game from Michael Ogletree there at Spain Park defensively. For the Chelsea Hornets and Calera Eagles, they closed the season out this past Friday night in a county battle as well. You look at Chelsea, they win that game 31-14, a team that's battled a lot this year injury-wise with COVID-19. Didn't know that they would make it through the season. They end up closing the season out with a 31-14 win. Calera took a 7-0 lead early in that game on a nice touchdown pass from about 30 yards out, but then here comes Chelsea. Chelsea came back and outscored Calera 31-7 the rest of the way for a tremendous effort there from the Hornets. And you look at the leading receiver in that game, Gabe Ruffin, on his final home game there for Chelsea, 109 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns on 6 receptions. So a strong night for him and the Chelsea defense. The defense They had one interception, and also to start the second half, they were in a very tight game there to start the second half, and they come out and they scoop and score. A bad snap to Tyler Nelson, the Calera quarterback. They leads to a scoop and score for the Chelsea defense. Really set the tone the rest of the way in that game as Chelsea was able to pull away, pick up the 31-14 win. Now that's a Calera team and a Chelsea team, both with a ton of young talent on both sides of the football. These two teams, in my opinion, next year and the year after, going to be a lot of fun to watch. Both were starting sophomore quarterbacks in that game, and both had throughout most of the season. You look at Tyler Nelson at Calera, you look at a lot of the playmakers he's going to have back. They were starting mainly sophomores this year, only one or two seniors in the starting rotation this year in general. So what they were able to do this year in some tight games, played some of their best games in the 6A classification since they've been here. This is a Calera team that's going to be one to watch moving forward the next couple of years, and same for Chelsea. A ton of talent back there for the Hornets. Didn't know what they were going to have coming into the game or into the season this year, aside from the secondary, running back, and wide receiver. Aside from that, they knew nothing about what was set to be on the field because there was no spring practice and because they got a late start this summer, trying to replace a ton of talent there coming into this year. So a strong year for them. They had a chance to make the playoffs, end with a 31-14 win, and a lot of guys with some experience that'll be coming back next year. Now on to some other teams that had some big performances this past Friday night. Kobe Hughes and Marquise Johnson, the Helena Huskies, in a huge 12-7 win against UMS Wright. Both of those guys with big plays. Marquise Johnson scores the first half touchdown. Kobe Hughes scores the second half touchdown, and both just churned away throughout the game. They'll be big this Friday night in the first round of the playoffs. The Helena defense forced a couple of turnover on downs late in that game and an interception, all of that in the fourth quarter to help preserve the 12-7 win. That's what you want to see. Kobe Hughes and Marquise Johnson offensively this Friday night, and the defense to play like that physically as well in that big first-round playoff matchup. For the Briarwood Lions, Christopher Vizina, another big game this past Friday night for one big reason, in my opinion. Obviously, the yards weren't crazy statistical, 175 yards, but had two more touchdowns, ran for 43 yards, and most importantly, had no interceptions. This Friday, you can't turn the ball over against Hartselle. I think to have a couple of games of confidence now with no turnovers and just consistent effort, I think that's big for Vizina going into this first round as still a sophomore quarterback, which I don't think a lot of people realized. Also on the offensive side for Briarwood, Luke Rebels had 91 yards and 2 touchdowns on 9 carries running the football, but also added a 92-yard kickoff return. He's a guy that will be all over the field, one to watch as well against Hartselle. And then defensively, Tyler Wall, just an unbelievable year so far, one of the best defensive players in the state, had a pick 6 last week and a big win against Corner as well. So just overall, Briarwood, a solid team going into this first round of the playoffs, looking at what they can do offensively as well as on the defensive side of the football. For the Shelby County Wildcats, Evan Joyner had 297 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns for the Wildcats in their win over Talladega last week. Continue to gain that confidence with 2 wins in a row going into the postseason. So a strong night for the Shelby County Wildcats and Joyner. They'll need that and more going into that first-round matchup with Pike Road, a 10-0 football team. For the Vincent Yellow Jackets, 2 guys stepped up big, helped the Jackets close out the season with a victory last Friday night. Tay McGregor and Jamari Lawson. Tay McGregor, final game for the Yellow Jackets as a senior, had 105 yards and 2 touchdowns on 5 carries in that game. Jamari Lawson, he'll be back next year. A very talented young playmaker for the Vincent Yellow Jackets, has been great this year. Had 225 total yards and 2 touchdowns in that win for the Yellow Jackets as they closed the season in strong fashion last week against Prattville Christian with a 33-28 victory. So a big night last Friday night to close out the regular season. Expect even more this Friday night as we begin the postseason run. That's going to do it for this week's edition of the Shelby County High School Football Show. We'll see you all here from Briarwood Christian School on Friday night, the first round of the playoffs, and 7 total teams in the postseason this year. Like I said, the last 3 years we've only had 5 make it that far. This year we've got 7, and we've got 4 playing at home this Friday night. Going to be a strong run of games. Teams looking for upsets, teams set to compete in what should be fairly even matchups on paper. And then you've got a couple of 7A matchups there for Thompson and Oak Mountain that also should be interesting battles as well for 2 different reasons. So going to be a lot of fun. Regardless, it's November. It's a new season. We kick off the playoffs this Friday night. I'm excited to see it unfold. Will we have another state champion this year? Thompson looks to repeat. Others look to pick up a state title as well. Going to be an interesting ride. I'm excited to see it all unfold. We will see you here Friday night to kick it off.